Alright, buckle up, because this one is going to shake everything you thought you knew about the biggest boy band on planet Earth. We're talking about BTS, 7 men who collectively hold the dreams of millions, whose every breath is monitored by fans, paparazzi, and dispatch outlets armed with telephoto lenses that could photograph a grain of rice from 3 blocks away. Now here's the question that nobody wants to ask out loud, but everybody is dying to know: what happens when the cameras turn off? What happens when the stadium lights fade, the airport crowds disappear, and these 7 global superstars check into luxury hotels under names that aren't their own? Because let's be brutally honest here, over the years, some of the most explosive K-pop scandals didn't come from stage mishaps or contract disputes. They came from hotel lobbies, parking garages, and blurry photos taken at 2 in the morning that spread across the internet faster than a comeback trailer. And BTS? They weren't immune. Not even close. So what really went down? Which member was caught leaving a 5-star hotel at dawn with a woman whose identity sent the entire fandom into a meltdown? Who was spotted by eagle-eyed fans checking into the same resort as a top actress on the exact same weekend? Coincidence or confirmation? And here's the real kicker. Was there a member whose hotel visit was so carefully hidden that it took years before anyone even connected the dots? From leaked CCTV screenshots to mysterious car plates traced by online detectives, from Dispatch's infamous New Year's Day reveals to insider tips that turned fan forums into full-blown investigation units. Every single story on this list is backed by timelines, locations, and details that will make your jaw drop. We're counting down from number 7 to number 1, and trust me, the higher we climb, the wilder it gets. So if you think you know everything about BTS and their private lives, think again. Because what you're about to hear, it's not fan fiction. It's what actually happened behind closed doors. Let's get into it. Number 7. Jin. The silent gentleman's secret that nobody saw coming. You know what's funny about Kim Seokjin? In a group where every sneeze makes headlines and every airport outfit gets dissected by millions, Jin somehow managed to be the one member whose private life stayed almost completely invisible for the longest time. And that alone should tell you something, because in the world of K-pop, where Dispatch literally camps outside apartment buildings with night vision cameras waiting for idols to slip up, staying invisible isn't luck. It's a carefully executed operation. But here's the thing, no operation is perfect forever. Let's rewind to the years between 2018 and 2020, the peak of BTS's global domination era. We're talking about a period where the group was selling out stadiums with 60,000 seats in minutes, breaking Billboard records that hadn't been touched since the Beatles, and generating an estimated $4.65 billion annually for South Korea's economy, according to the Hybe Research Institute. Every member was under a microscope so powerful it could detect a change in hairstyle from a single fancam pixel. And yet, during this exact period, whispers started circulating in the deepest corners of Korean fan communities. Whispers about Jin being spotted at a high-end hotel in the Gangnam district of Seoul, not alone, but with a woman whose face was carefully shielded by a mask, a cap, and what fans described as an oversized coat that screamed, "I don't want to be recognized." Now, let's set the scene properly, because context matters everything here. Gangnam isn't just any neighborhood. This is the epicenter of South Korea's luxury lifestyle, home to 5-star hotels like the Park Hyatt Seoul, the Intercontinental CX, and dozens of boutique establishments that cater specifically to celebrities who need discretion. These hotels have private entrances, underground parking with elevator access directly to rooms, and staff trained to forget faces the moment they see them. It's basically the K-pop dating playbook, Chapter 1. The initial reports came not from Dispatch, which is important to note, but from anonymous posts on community boards like Pan and The Coup, where a user claimed to have been working part-time at a hotel and recognized Jin despite his disguise. The post described Jin arriving late at night in a black van, not the usual BTS convoy, but a private vehicle with tinted windows, and being escorted through a side entrance, while a woman waited separately in the lobby before being guided to the same floor. The post was vague enough to avoid legal trouble, but specific enough to send fans into an absolute frenzy. Within hours, the thread had thousands of comments, split roughly down the middle between fans defending Jin's right to privacy and others demanding proof. And here's where it gets interesting: no proof ever came. No photographs, no CCTV leaks, no follow-up from any credible media outlet. The original post was eventually deleted, and the user's account went dark. In any other situation, this would be the end of the story, just another baseless rumor lost in the noise of the internet. But what kept this particular whisper alive was Jin's own behavior in the weeks that followed. Longtime fans, the ones who'd been tracking BTS content since their debut in 2013 under Big Hit Entertainment's humble beginnings, noticed something subtle but unmistakable. During V-Lives and group interactions, Jin seemed slightly more guarded when the topic of dating came up. Now, Jin had always been the member who joked about being worldwide handsome and deflected personal questions with humor. That was his signature move. But there was a shift. Where he used to laugh off dating questions with exaggerated confidence, he started redirecting conversations more quickly, more deliberately, almost as if someone had coached him to avoid the topic entirely. Was it Big Hit's management stepping in? Possibly. Was it Jin's own decision to draw a harder line between his public persona and private life? Also possible. But the timing right after those hotel rumors was too precise to ignore. Let's also talk about something that most international fans don't fully appreciate: the dating culture within South Korea's entertainment industry and the specific pressures it places on male idols. In a 2019 survey conducted by the Korea Creative Content Agency, over 67% of active idol group fans admitted they would feel betrayed or disappointed if their favorite member was confirmed to be in a relationship. That number jumps even higher for top-tier groups like BTS, where the parasocial bond between artist and fan is not just emotional, it's economic. Album sales, concert attendance, merchandise revenue, brand endorsement deals, all of it is built, at least partially, on the illusion of availability. Jin understood this better than anyone. As the eldest member, born December 4th, 1992, he carried a sense of responsibility that went beyond just singing his parts and hitting his marks on stage. He was the emotional anchor of the group, the one who kept morale high during their trainee days when they were practicing in a cramped studio in Nonhyundong with barely enough money for meals. He wasn't about to let a personal scandal jeopardize what 7 men had built from nothing. So what really happened at that hotel? The honest answer is, we don't know for certain. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Jin's greatest achievement in the realm of personal privacy isn't that he never dated, because let's be real, the idea that a charming, wealthy, globally famous man in his late 20s never had a romantic relationship is statistically absurd. But that he managed to keep it so completely under wraps that even Dispatch, the outlet that has successfully exposed couples like Kai and Jennie, Song Joong-ki and Song Hye-kyo, and Hyuna and Dawn, couldn't pin anything on him. That's not just discretion. That's an art form. Jin enlisted for his mandatory military service in December 2022, becoming the first BTS member to do so, and even that chapter of his life was handled with the same quiet dignity. He didn't make a spectacle of it. He showed up, shaved his head, and served. And somewhere in the back of everyone's mind, there's this lingering thought: did he use those military years to finally live a part of his life without the weight of 100 million eyes on him? We may never get a full answer, and honestly, maybe we don't deserve one. But if Jin's story is the mildest one on this list, and believe me, it is, then what does that tell you about what's coming next? Because at number 6, we're about to meet a member whose hotel situation didn't just generate whispers, it generated headlines, fan wars, and a collaboration controversy that had the entire music industry picking sides. Number 6. V. The leaked photos that broke the internet and exposed a secret love across 2 empires. If Jin's story was a locked vault that nobody could crack, then Kim Taehyung's story is the exact opposite. It's a vault that got blown wide open against his will, scattered across every corner of the internet, and turned into the single most chaotic dating scandal in modern K-pop history. And we're not talking about a blurry paparazzi shot taken from 200 meters away that could be literally anyone. We're talking about high-resolution, intimate, Undeniable photographs that left zero room for interpretation. Photos that connected a BTS member to a Blackpink member, two artists from the two biggest K-pop groups on the planet, managed by two rival entertainment empires that have historically kept their distance from each other. This isn't just a dating rumor. This is a geopolitical event in the K-pop universe. Let's start from the beginning, because the way this unfolded reads like a thriller movie that no screenwriter would dare pitch because it would sound too unrealistic. It was September 2021 when the first tremor hit. An anonymous account on Twitter, not a fan account, not a gossip page, but a completely blank profile with no followers and no history, posted a single photograph. The image showed two people sitting inside what appeared to be a luxury car, and while the quality wasn't crystal clear, K-pop fans who, let's be honest, have investigative skills that would make the FBI jealous, immediately started cross-referencing every detail in the frame. The interior of the car, the clothing, the accessories, the jawline angles. Within hours, the consensus was forming. That's V. And the person next to him? That's Jennie Kim of Blackpink. Now, pause here for a second and understand the magnitude of what was happening. BTS, under Hybe Corporation, formerly Big Hit Entertainment, is a group that generated approximately South Korea. Blackpink, under YG Entertainment, is the highest charting female K-pop act in history, with Jenna herself being that global ambassador for Chanel, pulling in an estimated $2-3 million per brand campaign. A confirmed relationship between these two individuals wouldn't just be celebrity gossip, it would affect stock prices, fan loyalty metrics, brand partnership calculations, and the entire strategic positioning of two publicly traded entertainment companies. And that's exactly what made this leak so explosive. But the car photo was just the appetizer. Over the following months, stretching from late 2021 through 2022, more photos leaked. And each batch was more damaging than the last. One set appeared to show V and Jennie together on what fans identified as Jeju Island, South Korea's premier vacation destination, famous for its luxury resorts, private villas, and the kind of seclusion that celebrities crave. The photos showed them in casual settings, walking together, seemingly relaxed, in the kind of unguarded moments that you only share with someone you're genuinely comfortable with. Another batch showed what appeared to be the interior of a hotel room or a private residence, with personal items visible in the background that fans painstakingly matched to items V and Jennie had been seen wearing or using in separate public appearances. The level of forensic analysis that went into verifying these photos was genuinely staggering. Fans created side-by-side comparison threads with timestamps, GPS metadata analysis, weather reports from specific dates to match the lighting in photos, and even architectural blueprints of Jeju resorts to identify the exact property. We're talking about crowdsourced intelligence work that rivaled professional investigations. And here's where the story takes a darker turn, because none of these photos were released by Dispatch, the outlet that traditionally owns the celebrity dating reveal market in South Korea. These photos were leaked by hackers. Multiple reports, including coverage from Korean outlets like Sports Chosen and Newson, indicated that the images were obtained through unauthorized access to private accounts, likely iCloud or personal devices. This wasn't journalism. This was a cybercrime. And it raised a deeply uncomfortable question that the K-pop industry had been avoiding for years. At what point does fan curiosity cross the line into violation? Hybe's response was cautious to the point of being almost frustrating. For months, the company offered no official statement, neither confirming nor denying the relationship, which in K-pop communication is basically a silent confirmation. YG Entertainment, on the other hand, eventually broke the silence in early 2022 with a carefully worded statement acknowledging that the photos existed, but emphasizing that the private lives of their artists should be respected. It was a diplomatic answer that satisfied absolutely nobody. Fans who supported the relationship wanted celebration, fans who opposed it wanted denial, and everyone in between just wanted clarity. But clarity in the K-pop industry is a luxury that companies rarely provide because clarity has consequences. A confirmed relationship means recalculating everything, concert VCR narratives that hint at romantic loneliness, fan service moments between members that sustain shipping culture, and the entire emotional architecture that keeps fans invested at a level that goes far beyond casual music consumption. What made V's situation uniquely painful compared to other idol dating reveals was the element of consent, or rather, the complete absence of it. When Dispatch reveals a couple, there's at least a protocol. Agencies are typically contacted beforehand, given a chance to respond, and sometimes negotiations happen behind the scenes about timing and framing. With V and Jennie, there was no protocol, no warning, no negotiation. Their private moments were ripped from their personal devices and thrown to the wolves of the internet without any consideration for how it would affect them as human beings. V, known for his deeply artistic and emotionally sensitive personality, the man who listens to jazz alone, who paints in his free time, who once said in a Weverse interview that he values genuine human connection above almost everything, had one of his most intimate relationships exposed in the most invasive way possible. And he had to process that violation while simultaneously being one of the most watched men on Earth, with every facial expression during public appearances being analyzed for signs of stress, sadness, or confirmation. The Jeju Hotel connection specifically became a focal point because fans traced specific dates when both V and Jennie appeared to be absent from public schedules, cross-referenced flight records, and social media activity gaps, and concluded that multiple private getaways had occurred over a period of months. The hotels in question, while never officially named, were speculated to be among Jeju's most exclusive properties, the kind of places where presidential suites cost upward of $3,000 per night and come equipped with private pools, personal chefs, and entrances designed specifically to avoid public detection. These are the same properties frequented by top Korean actors, chaebol heirs, and politicians who need absolute discretion. The fact that even these fortress-level privacy measures weren't enough to protect V and Jennie tells you everything you need to know about the impossible standard of surveillance that K-pop idols live under. By 2023, the narrative shifted again. V was spotted in Paris during Fashion Week, and so was Jennie, both attending separate events, but staying in the same arrondissement, fueling another round of speculation. Then came V's solo activities, including his solo album Layover, released in September 2023, which featured tracks dripping with romantic vulnerability, songs like Slow Dancing and Love Me Again, that fans immediately interpreted as reflections of his real-life emotional state. Whether those songs were about Jennie, about love in general, or about something entirely different, only V knows. But the timing, the tone, and the raw sincerity in his voice suggested a man who had lived through something real and was processing it the only way an artist knows how, through his craft. V eventually entered military service in December 2023, and with that came a natural quieting of the public narrative. But the impact of his hotel scandal, if we can even call it that, because scandal implies wrongdoing where there was none, left a permanent mark on how the industry thinks about idol privacy, digital security, and the ethical boundaries of fan culture. Hybe reportedly upgraded their cybersecurity protocols across all artist accounts, and the broader conversation about hacking as a form of fan entitlement gained traction in Korean media in ways it never had before. So here's the reflection that lingers: V didn't do anything wrong. He fell in love, or at least pursued a connection with someone, in the way that any 26-year-old man with a beating heart would. The crime was being famous enough that even his private moments became public property. And the hotel visits that were meant to be sanctuaries, places where he could exist as Kim Taehyung instead of V of BTS, became evidence in a trial he never consented to. That's not a scandal. That's a tragedy wrapped in a love story wrapped in the brutal machinery of modern fame. Number 5. Suga, the producer's midnight rendezvous that sparked a collaboration conspiracy. Here's the thing about Min Youngie that separates him from every other member on this list. He doesn't just guard his privacy, he engineers it. While other idols rely on masks, hats, and tinted car windows, Suga built an entire lifestyle architecture around invisibility. This is a man who once admitted on a live broadcast that he could go days without leaving his studio. A man whose idea of a perfect evening is sitting alone with a MIDI controller and a glass of whiskey, crafting beats until 4 in the morning. He is, by every measure, the most deliberately unreachable member of BTS. And that's exactly why when rumors about him and a hotel visit surfaced, the K-pop world didn't just pay attention, it lost its collective mind. Because if Suga got caught, it meant the fortress had a crack. And everyone wanted to see what was on the other side. Let's go back to 2017, because that's where this entire saga plants its roots, and if you don't understand 2017, you won't understand anything that came after. In August of that year, Suga, operating under his producer alias Auguste, released a collaboration with Korean R&B singer Saran, a track called Wine that he produced, co-wrote, and shaped into one of the smoothest R&B records to come out of South Korea that year. The song wasn't just good, it was a genuine hit, peaking on multiple Korean music charts and earning Saran a Best Soul/R&B award at the Melon Music Awards. On paper, this was a straightforward producer-artist collaboration, the kind of thing that happens hundreds of times a year in the music industry. But K-pop doesn't operate on paper. It operates on perception. And the perception shifted violently when Saran posted an Instagram photo shortly after the song's release, a seemingly innocent image of a night sky with a caption that fans, armed with their bottomless capacity for interpretation, decoded as a reference to Suga. The specific wording, the timing of the post, the emoji choices, all of it was dissected, cross-referenced with Suga's known habits and recent social media activity, and within hours, the verdict was in. They're dating. Now, let's pause here and appreciate the absurdity and the brilliance of K-pop detective culture, because this is the ecosystem that turned a cloud photo into a dating confirmation. Fan accounts created entire timelines showing parallel gaps in Suga and Saran's public schedules, theorizing that these gaps represented private meetings. Others dug into Saran's previous interviews, pulling quotes about her ideal type and matching descriptors to Suga's known personality traits: introverted, musically obsessive, quietly intense. The circumstantial case was building, and it was building fast. But the real firestorm ignited when an anonymous post appeared on a Korean online community, one of those platforms like NatePan that serves as the unofficial courtroom of Korean public opinion, claiming that Suga and Saran had been seen together at a boutique hotel in the Itaewon district of Seoul. The post was detailed enough to be dangerous. It described the hotel as one of those trendy, design-forward establishments that had become popular among young Korean creatives and entertainment industry insiders, the kind of place with exposed brick walls, vinyl record players in every room, and a rooftop bar where the staff prides itself on not recognizing famous faces. According to the post, Suga arrived first, alone, through the main entrance without any visible attempt at disguise, which, if true, was either a display of supreme confidence or a sign that he genuinely believed nobody would notice him in a neighborhood as cosmopolitan and celebrity-dense as Itaewon. Saran, the post claimed, arrived approximately 30 minutes later, and both were not seen leaving until the following morning. The post included no photographs, a detail that immediately divided the online community. Skeptics pointed out that in an era where everyone carries a smartphone capable of 4K video, the absence of visual evidence was damning to the claim's credibility. But believers countered with an equally valid point. Itaewon's boutique hotels attract a clientele that values discretion precisely because staff and regular guests maintain an unspoken code of non-documentation. You don't pull out your phone in these places. That's the whole point. What happened next was something that reveals the darker side of K-pop fandom in ways that most casual observers never see. The dating rumors didn't just create gossip, they created real-world consequences for Saran. Aggressive fans of BTS, operating under the twisted logic that Suga belonged to the fandom and any woman in his life was a threat, flooded Saran's social media with hostile comments. Not just critical comments, genuinely vicious, threatening messages that ranged from career sabotage threats to personal attacks on her appearance, her talent, and her worth as a human being. The harassment was so severe that Saran took to Instagram to publicly deny the dating rumors, posting a statement that was equal parts desperate clarification and barely concealed pain. She explained that her relationship with Suga was purely professional, that the Instagram post fans had interpreted as a romantic signal was nothing more than a personal reflection, and she practically begged fans to stop the harassment. Her voice in that written statement carried the kind of exhaustion that comes not from physical tiredness, but from the emotional depletion of being attacked for something that, even if it were true, shouldn't warrant attack in the first place. And here's the part that still haunts anyone who followed this story closely. Saran's career trajectory visibly changed after the incident. Before the Suga collaboration, she was on an upward path, gaining recognition as a talented vocalist with a unique aesthetic. After the dating rumors and the fan backlash, her public activities decreased noticeably. She spoke in later interviews about the toll it took on her mental health, describing a period of anxiety and self-doubt that made it difficult to create music without second-guessing how every lyric, every photo, every public appearance would be weaponized against her. Whether the dating rumors were true or not became almost irrelevant. The damage was done regardless. Suga himself never addressed the rumors directly, which is perfectly consistent with his personality, but also strategically brilliant. In K-pop crisis management, silence is often the most powerful response because it denies the rumor oxygen. Any statement, confirmation, or denial would have kept the story alive for weeks. By saying nothing, Suga allowed the news cycle to move on, which it eventually did, though not before leaving permanent scars on Saran's career and reputation. But the hotel question lingered in the background like a bass note you can feel but can't quite hear. In the years that followed, Suga's movement patterns became a subject of quiet fascination among dedicated fans and Korean entertainment reporters alike. His studio, known as Genius Lab, located within Hybe's headquarters in Yongsan-gu, Seoul, became almost a mythical space, a place where he was known to spend 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours at a stretch, making it genuinely difficult to track his personal movements because his professional life consumed so much of his time. But even the most dedicated workaholic has hours unaccounted for, and those gaps, those mysterious windows between late-night studio sessions and early morning schedules, became the canvas onto which fans and reporters projected their theories. The Itaewon Hotel claim was never verified, never debunked, and never repeated by any credible media outlet. It exists in that gray zone of K-pop lore, too specific to be dismissed entirely, too unsubstantiated to be accepted as fact. What we do know is that Suga, throughout his career, has demonstrated a level of emotional intelligence about relationships and privacy that suggests he understands the stakes better than almost anyone in the industry. His solo work as August D, particularly tracks like People from his 2020 mixtape D2, deals explicitly with the complexity of human connections, the pain of relationships that exist under impossible conditions, and the loneliness of being surrounded by millions of people who love an image of you rather than the reality. When he raps people change, that's what people do, there's a weight behind those words that transcends generic songwriting. Number 4, Jungkook, the golden magne's tattooed secret that Dispatch hunted for months. Let's talk about the member who was supposed to be untouchable. The one they called the Golden Magne, a title that wasn't just a cute nickname, but a genuine reflection of a young man who seemed genetically engineered for stardom. Jungkook could sing, dance, rap, draw, film, edit videos, play sports at a semi-professional level, and somehow still manage to look like a Renaissance sculpture while doing all of it. He was BTS's youngest, their crown jewel, the member who joined Big Hit Entertainment as a 15-year-old trainee in 2011 after turning down offers from 6 other agencies, including JYP Entertainment and FNC Entertainment, because something about Bang Si-hyuk's vision convinced a teenager from Busan that this was the company worth betting his entire future on. And for over a decade, that bet paid off in ways that defied imagination. Jungkook became the most followed individual on Instagram within hours of creating his account. His solo track, 7, released in July 2023, debuted at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. He performed at the 2022 FIFA World Cup opening ceremony in Qatar in front of an estimated global audience of over 1 billion people. This was not just a K-pop idol. This was a cultural phenomenon operating at a level that most artists never reach in an entire career. And yet, beneath all that golden armor, Jungkook had a vulnerability that the public rarely saw, until Dispatch decided it was time to show them. The timeline begins in 2022, a year that was already emotionally charged for BTS and their fans. In June of that year, the group had announced their decision to focus on solo activities, a moment that felt like a fracture in the foundation of millions of fans' emotional worlds. The announcement came through a tearful dinner video that was simultaneously the most honest and most heartbreaking piece of content BTS had ever released. Fans were raw, sensitive, and hyper-vigilant about any news involving the members. It was the worst possible environment for a dating scandal to land. And then it landed like a meteor. In the fall of 2022, Korean media outlets began circulating reports that Jungkook had been spotted multiple times in the Itaewon and Hanam-dong areas of Seoul, neighborhoods known for their vibrant nightlife, upscale restaurants, and the kind of dimly lit cocktail bars where celebrities go specifically to not be celebrities for a few hours. But Jungkook wasn't just bar hopping. According to Dispatch, which had reportedly been tracking his movements for weeks, possibly months, before going public, Jungkook was consistently seen in the company of the same woman. And when fans and reporters finally identified her, the revelation sent shockwaves through the fandom not because of who she was in terms of fame or status, but because of who she wasn't. She wasn't an idol. She wasn't an actress. She wasn't a chaebol heiress or a model with 1 million followers. She was a tattoo artist, a professional ink artist working in one of Seoul's trendy tattoo studios, someone completely outside the K-pop ecosystem, someone whose world operated on entirely different rules and entirely different values. And that disconnect between the hyper-controlled, image-obsessed universe of BTS and the raw, artistic, subcultural world of tattooing was what made the story so fascinating and so polarizing at the same time. Now, here's where the hotel element enters the picture, and it enters with the subtlety of a freight train. Dispatch's reporting didn't just confirm that Jungkook and this woman knew each other. It painted a detailed picture of a relationship that had clearly been developing over a significant period. Sources close to the reporting described multiple instances of Jungkook visiting locations associated with the woman, including what was characterized as overnight stays at private accommodations. The Korean media, with its characteristic blend of euphemism and implication, used phrases that any Korean reader would immediately understand as references to hotel visits or private apartment stays without explicitly naming specific establishments. A legal strategy designed to convey maximum information with minimum liability. Fan investigators, however, had no such legal constraints. Within days of the initial reports, online communities had assembled a dossier that would make a private detective weep with professional envy. They traced specific dates when Jungkook's official schedule showed gaps, periods of 12, 24, sometimes 48 hours where no public appearances, social media posts, or V-Live sessions were logged. They cross-referenced these gaps with the woman's social media activity, noting patterns where her posts would also decrease or shift in timing during the same windows. They analyzed car sightings, matching vehicle models and license plate fragments captured in fan photos to known vehicles associated with Hybe's artist fleet. And perhaps most remarkably, they tracked tattoo progression, cataloging every new piece of ink on Jungkook's body and matching the style, technique, and artistic signature to work publicly displayed on the woman's professional portfolio. The tattoos themselves became a narrative. Jungkook's transformation from a relatively clean-cut idol to a heavily tattooed artist was one of the most visible personal evolutions in K-pop history. His right hand and arm gradually became a canvas of interconnected designs, each one carrying personal meaning, each one reportedly done during private sessions that lasted hours at a time. And private tattoo sessions, by their nature, involve a level of physical intimacy and trust that goes beyond a typical professional interaction. You're in a closed room, often for 3 to 5 hours, with someone whose hands are on your skin, creating something permanent on your body. The emotional architecture of that experience, the vulnerability, the trust, the shared creative vision, is the kind of foundation that romantic connections are built on. Hybe's official response was measured, but notably different from how they had handled previous dating situations. Rather than issuing a flat denial or a cold no comment, the company released a statement that essentially said the member's private life was his own and asked fans to respect his personal boundaries. This was a strategic pivot, a recognition that the old playbook of deny and suppress was no longer viable in an era where Dispatch had the receipts and fans had the forensic skills to verify them independently. But respect and K-pop fandom have always had a complicated relationship, and Jungkook's situation exposed that tension in its rawest form. The response from ARMY, BTS's global fanbase, was anything but unified. International fans, particularly those in Western markets where dating is considered a normal and even celebrated part of an artist's life, largely rallied behind Jungkook with messages of support. Trending hashtags like Jungkook deserves love and protect Jungkook, and creating content that framed the situation as a positive step in his personal growth. Korean fans, however, were more divided. A significant segment expressed feelings of betrayal, not necessarily because Jungkook was dating, but because the nature of the relationship and the lifestyle it implied, the late-night outings, the Itaewon bar scene, the tattoo culture, clashed with the wholesome, dedicated, almost monastic image of Jungkook that had been cultivated over years of carefully managed content. There's a concept in Korean fan culture called gap, the distance between an idol's public persona and their real personality. A small gap is charming, endearing, humanizing. A large gap is destabilizing. And Jungkook's gap, as revealed by the scandal, was larger than most fans were prepared to process. The young man who sang Euphoria with the innocence of first love, who cried on stage when thanking fans for their support, who seemed to blush at the mere mention of romance in interviews, that man was spending his nights in Itaewon bars, getting tattooed until dawn, and maintaining a relationship that existed entirely outside the carefully constructed BTS narrative. It wasn't a contradiction, it was a revelation. Jungkook was growing up, in public, on a timeline that didn't match the one fans had written for him in their heads. What makes this story resonate beyond the gossip is what it says about the impossible standard placed on the youngest members of idol groups. Jungkook debuted at 15. He spent his entire adolescence and young adulthood inside the BTS machine, a machine that gave him everything in terms of career success, but demanded nearly everything in terms of personal freedom. By 2022, he was 25 years old, and the idea that a 25-year-old man shouldn't be allowed to date, to go out at night, to express himself through body art, and to form intimate connections with people outside his professional circle is not just unreasonable, it's a form of emotional captivity dressed up as love. The hotel visits, the bar nights, the tattoo sessions, these weren't scandals. Number 3, RM, the intellectual leader's private escape that Dispatch tracked across borders. If there's one member of BTS who seemed like he could outsmart the entire surveillance apparatus of the Korean entertainment industry, it was Kim Namjoon. This is a man with a verified IQ of 148, who taught himself English by watching the American sitcom Friends on repeat, who has delivered speeches at the United Nations General Assembly not once, but multiple times, standing at the same podium where world leaders negotiate the fate of nations. RM is the kind of person who reads Haruki Murakami novels for relaxation, visits contemporary art museums the way most people scroll through social media, and can seamlessly shift between discussing Nietzschean philosophy and breaking down the rhythmic structure of a hip-hop verse in the same conversation. He is, without exaggeration, one of the most intellectually formidable figures to ever emerge from the K-pop industry. And yet, for all his brilliance, for all his strategic thinking and calculated public persona, even RM couldn't outrun Dispatch forever. And when the net finally closed around him, It didn't close in Seoul. It closed across international borders, in a story that had entertainment reporters on 2 continents working their sources simultaneously. And it revealed a side of Namjoon that fans had always suspected existed, but had never been able to confirm. The groundwork for this story was laid years before it broke. RM had always been the member most openly philosophical about love, relationships, and the human need for connection. His solo work, particularly his 2022 album, Indigo, which he described as a documentation of his youth, was saturated with references to longing, intimacy, and the bittersweet reality of trying to build something real in a life that was fundamentally unreal. Tracks like Wildflower, featuring Eugene of the rock band Cherry Filter, explored the tension between wanting to burn brightly in public and wanting to find peace in private. All Day, featuring Tableau of Epic High, carried the weariness of a man who had spent a decade performing emotions on stage and was searching for a space where emotions didn't need to be performed. These weren't abstract artistic exercises, they were confessions disguised as music, and the fans who listened closely knew that Namjoon was telling them something without explicitly saying it. He was in love, or he had been in love, or he was desperately trying to figure out how love could exist inside the cage of his fame. The first concrete rumor surfaced on Korean community boards in a pattern that had become grimly familiar: anonymous posts, vague but suggestive details, and just enough specificity to be credible without crossing into legally actionable territory. The claim was straightforward but explosive. RM had been maintaining a relationship with a woman who was not a public figure, but who moved in culturally sophisticated circles, the kind of person you might find at a gallery opening in Hanam-dong, a private lecture at a university in Hongdae, or a jazz club in Yeonnam-dong where the entry list is curated by word of mouth. She was described as educated, independent, artistic, and deliberately distant from the entertainment industry, essentially, the exact type of person you would expect Kim Namjoon to be drawn to if you understood him beyond the surface. But the hotel dimension, the element that elevates this from a standard dating rumor to a story worthy of this list, came from a source that nobody expected: international fan sightings. And this is where the narrative takes a turn that underscores just how impossible privacy is for someone at RM's level of fame. In the months preceding Dispatch's eventual coverage, multiple fan accounts on Twitter and Weverse reported seeing RM in locations that didn't align with any publicly known schedule, locations that weren't in Seoul, weren't in South Korea, and in some cases weren't even in Asia. One particularly detailed account, posted by a Korean exchange student studying abroad, described encountering RM at a boutique hotel in a European city, not a massive chain hotel with corporate anonymity, but a small, design-conscious property with fewer than 40 rooms, the kind of place that appears in architectural magazines and attracts guests who value aesthetics over brand recognition. The student described seeing RM in the hotel's lobby cafe, dressed casually in the kind of earth-toned, oversized outfit that had become his signature off-duty look, sitting across from a woman whose face the student couldn't fully see, but whose presence seemed intimately familiar to RM. They weren't performing for anyone. There was no idle body language, no careful posture, no awareness of potential cameras, no invisible wall between public self and private self. They were just 2 people sharing a quiet morning in a beautiful space, and the student, to their credit, chose not to approach or photograph them. The account was posted only after news broke through official channels, as a retrospective confirmation of what the student had witnessed, but chosen to keep private out of respect. This detail, the choice to protect a stranger's privacy even when the stranger was one of the most famous men alive, is a small but important counterpoint to the invasive culture that dominates most K-pop fan spaces. But not everyone exercised that restraint. Other sightings placed RM at locations that, when mapped chronologically, suggested a pattern of international travel that mirrored someone else's schedule, someone who also had reasons to travel between Asian and European cities. Someone whose professional life involved the kind of cross-cultural movement that would make parallel itineraries look coincidental to a casual observer, but deeply suspicious to anyone paying close attention. The specifics of these sightings, which cities, which hotels, which dates, became the subject of obsessive analysis on platforms ranging from Korean Naver blogs to international Reddit threads. Fans created spreadsheets. Literal spreadsheets, with columns for date, location, source credibility rating, and corroborating evidence. They cross-referenced RM's known schedule gaps with international flight patterns, hotel check-in policies, and even time zone calculations to determine whether it was physically possible for him to be in a given location at a given time. The level of effort was simultaneously impressive and deeply unsettling, a reminder that in the age of connected information, the concept of disappearing is essentially a fantasy for anyone with a recognizable face. When Dispatch eventually addressed the RM dating story, the approach was notably different from their typical reveals. There was no dramatic New Year's Day photo drop, no paparazzi shots of a car leaving a parking garage at dawn. Instead, the coverage was almost restrained, acknowledging the relationship's existence without the sensationalized framing that usually accompanies these stories. Whether this restraint was a result of Hybe's negotiating leverage, RM's personal request, or Dispatch's own editorial judgment about how to handle a figure of RM's stature is a matter of speculation. But the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a gotcha moment. This was an acknowledgement of a reality that had been quietly understood by insiders for longer than the public realized. Hybe's official response mirrored this measured tone, confirming RM's relationship status without providing additional details and requesting privacy for all individuals involved. It was corporate speak, yes, but it was corporate speak that carried an implicit message. This is not a crisis. This is a fact of life. And the fandom's response, while not universally positive, was markedly more mature than the reactions to earlier BTS dating reveals. International Army largely celebrated, creating congratulatory content and expressing pride in RM's ability to maintain a healthy relationship despite the pressures of his career. Korean fans were more measured, but largely respectful, a shift that reflected both the changing demographics of the fanbase and the groundwork RM himself had laid through years of communicating, through his music, his interviews, his UN speeches. That emotional growth and human connection were not threats to his artistry, but essential components of it. The hotel visits, in RM's case, weren't seedy or scandalous. They were the quiet chapters of a love story written by a man who understood words better than almost anyone in his industry, a man who knew that some stories are best told not through lyrics or speeches, but through the simple, radical act of showing up for someone in a world that demands you show up for everyone. Namjoon didn't just visit hotels with someone he cared about. He built a private world inside public spaces, carved out moments of normalcy in a life defined by its abnormality, and did it with the same intellectual precision and emotional depth that he brought to every verse he ever wrote. The art museums, the jazz cafes, the boutique hotels with their minimalist lobbies and curated bookshelves, these weren't random choices. They were extensions of who Namjoon is, and the fact that he chose to share those spaces with someone suggests a level of trust and vulnerability that goes far deeper than what any Dispatch photo could capture. But if RM's story was a love letter written in quiet ink, then the story at number 2 is a love letter written in neon lights and set on fire. Because the next member didn't just get linked to a hotel visit, this member got linked to a woman who seemed to be dropping breadcrumbs for the entire internet to follow. Number 2, Jimin, the breadcrumb trail that turned a secret romance into a fandom civil war. Every scandal on this list so far has followed a familiar pattern. Someone gets spotted, photos leak, agencies issue statements, fans react, and the news cycle eventually moves on. But what happened with Park Jimin broke every rule in the K-pop scandal playbook because the exposure didn't come from Dispatch, didn't come from hackers, and didn't come from eagle-eyed fans lurking outside hotel lobbies with telephoto lenses. It came from the woman herself. Or at least, that's what millions of people believed. And whether she was deliberately exposing a relationship with one of the most beloved men on the planet, or simply living her life in a way that coincidentally mirrored his, that question alone tore the BTS fandom apart in a way that no comeback delay, no military enlistment announcement, and no corporate controversy ever had. we need to talk about Songdoon. If you were anywhere near K-pop social media in 2023, that name either makes your blood pressure spike or your eyes roll so hard they nearly detach from your skull. Because the saga surrounding this South Korean actress and social media personality became one of the most obsessively analyzed, furiously debated, and emotionally exhausting chapters in BTS fandom history. And at the center of it all, standing in the eye of a hurricane he never publicly acknowledged, was Jimin, the man whose angelic stage presence and devastating emotional performances had earned him the reputation as the heart of BTS. The member who cried the hardest, loved the deepest, and connected with fans at a frequency that felt almost spiritual. So how did someone like that end up at the center of a dating scandal that involved matching hotel locations, synchronized social media posts, and a woman who seemed to be playing a game of romantic chess with the entire internet watching? Let's start with the breadcrumbs, because the breadcrumbs are everything. In early 2023, sharp-eyed fans on Twitter and Korean community platforms began noticing something peculiar about Songdoon's Instagram activity. It started small, almost imperceptibly small. She posted a photo of a meal at a restaurant that fans recognized as a place Jimin had recently visited based on a separate social media post. Coincidence? Absolutely possible. Seoul is a massive city, but the celebrity dining circuit is surprisingly compact and overlap happens. But then it happened again. And again. And the coincidences started stacking up in ways that strained the definition of the word. She posted a photo wearing a bracelet that appeared identical to one Jimin had been seen wearing during a recent airport sighting, not a common mass-produced accessory, but a distinctive piece that fans had already cataloged in their exhaustive databases of Jimin's fashion choices. She uploaded a story showing a hotel room view at night, a sweeping cityscape shot that, when analyzed by fans using landmark identification and angle calculation, appeared to match a specific luxury hotel in Seoul's Yongsan district. Fans then cross-referenced this with Jimin's schedule and determined that he had no public commitments on that date, meaning he could theoretically have been anywhere, including at that hotel. She posted a song recommendation that happened to be a track Jimin had mentioned loving in a previous V-Live. She used a caption phrasing that echoed something Jimin had written on Weverse days earlier. Each individual breadcrumb was deniable. Each one could be explained away by coincidence, shared taste, or the simple reality that two people living in the same city consuming the same culture might naturally overlap in their choices. But taken together, assembled into a timeline, visualized on a map, cataloged in spreadsheets that would make an intelligence analyst proud, the pattern was overwhelming. And the K-pop internet exploded. The fan response was immediate, volcanic, and profoundly divided in ways that exposed fault lines within ARMY that had existed for years, but had never been tested this severely. On one side stood the fans who believed Songdoon was deliberately dropping hints about a relationship with Jimin, a strategy known in Korean entertainment circles as media play, where a lesser-known figure leverages a connection to a more famous person for publicity, career advancement, or social media growth. These fans pointed out that Songdoon's follower count surged dramatically as the rumor spread, that her engagement metrics skyrocketed, and that she appeared to be doing nothing to shut down the speculation even when it was clearly spiraling out of control. They accused her of using Jimin as a stepping stone, of violating the privacy of a man who had never consented to being part of her public narrative, and of treating a potential relationship as a marketing campaign rather than something sacred and private. The anger wasn't just protective, it was visceral. Fan accounts dedicated entire threads to dismantling Songdoon's social media history, pulling old posts, analyzing patterns, and constructing arguments that she had a history of seeking proximity to famous men. Whether these arguments were fair or wildly biased is a question that depends entirely on where you stood in the debate. On the other side were fans who argued that the entire backlash was a textbook example of toxic possessiveness, disguised as protectiveness. These fans contended that even if Jimin and Songdoon were dating, that was their right as consenting adults, and the fan response, the harassment, the doxing attempts, the organized campaigns to flood her comments with negative messages, was not an act of love for Jimin but an act of control. They pointed out the inherent misogyny in a dynamic where the woman is always blamed for seducing or trapping the male idol while the idol himself is portrayed as a passive victim incapable of making his own romantic choices. Jimin, they argued, was a 27-year-old man with full agency over his personal life, and the suggestion that he could be used by anyone without his knowledge or consent was infantilizing and disrespectful. This philosophical divide, protection versus possession, fan love versus fan control, had always existed within K-pop fandom culture, but the Jimin song Daeun Saga brought it to the surface with a rawness and intensity that was impossible to ignore. The hotel element became the most contested piece of evidence in this entire saga. Multiple fan investigation threads focused on a specific sequence of events in which Song Da-eun posted photos and stories that appeared to place her at luxury hotels on dates that aligned with gaps in Jimin's known schedule. One particularly explosive thread, which accumulated hundreds of thousands of views across platforms, presented a side-by-side analysis of a hotel room photo posted by Song Da-eun and architectural details from a known 5-star property in the Cheongdam-dong area, a neighborhood so synonymous with wealth and celebrity that it's essentially Seoul's answer to Beverly Hills. The thread claimed to have matched specific design elements, the pattern of the curtains, the style of the bedside lamps, the angle of the window relative to the skyline, to a particular suite in a particular hotel on a particular floor. Whether this analysis was genuinely accurate or an exercise in confirmation bias dressed up as forensic investigation remains hotly debated to this day. Hybe's response was swift and uncharacteristically direct. The company issued a denial, not a vague, "we respect our artist's privacy" statement, but an explicit denial that Jimin and Song Da-eun were in a romantic relationship. This was significant because Hybe, under most circumstances, preferred ambiguity. A direct denial carries risk. If evidence later emerges that contradicts the statement, the credibility damage is severe and permanent. The fact that Hybe chose to deny outright suggested one of two things. Either they had absolute confidence that no contradicting evidence existed, or the situation had escalated to a point where ambiguity was more dangerous than denial. Either way, the statement poured gasoline on an already raging fire, because Song Da-eun's social media behavior didn't change after the denial. She continued to post content that fans interpreted as references to Jimin, not more frequently, but not less either, creating a maddening ambiguity that kept the debate alive for months. Was she oblivious to the chaos? Was she defiant? Was she telling the truth through breadcrumbs because official channels had denied her the opportunity to tell it openly? Or was she simply a woman living her life who happened to like similar restaurants, similar music, and similar jewelry as one of the most popular men on earth? The psychological toll on Jimin during this period was impossible to measure from the outside, but easy to imagine. Here was a man whose entire artistic identity was built on emotional transparency, the member who, in his 2023 solo album, Face, confronted themes of loneliness, identity crisis, and the suffocating weight of public expectation with a vulnerability that left listeners genuinely worried about his well-being. The title track, Like Crazy, wasn't just a pop song, it was a confessional about losing yourself in the gap between who you are and who people need you to be, about drowning in expectations while smiling through performances, about the crazy-making experience of having your interior world constantly narrated by strangers. Number 1, J-Hope, the sunshine's best-kept secret, a love hidden in plain sight for years. And here we are. Number 1. The final name on a list that has taken us through leaked photographs, anonymous forum posts, breadcrumb trails, fandom civil wars, cybercrime, international sightings, and the kind of emotional turbulence that would make a daytime television writer jealous. And if you've been paying attention, if you've been tracking the escalation from Jin's unbreakable silence to V's stolen privacy to Suga's collateral damage to Jungkook's tattooed rebellion to RM's quiet intellectual romance to Jimin's unresolved mystery, then you know that whatever sits at number 1 has to be something different. Something that doesn't just shock, but fundamentally alters the way you see a person you thought you understood. And that person is Young Hoseok. J-Hope, the man they call BTS's sunshine. The man whose energy on stage is so relentlessly electric, so aggressively positive, so overwhelmingly radiant that fans have spent over a decade debating whether any human being can genuinely be that happy or whether it's the most committed performance in entertainment history. And here's the answer that number one delivers with the force of a revelation you never saw coming: J-Hope is real. Every bit of that warmth is real. But what's also real is the entire universe of emotional depth, romantic complexity, and deliberate secrecy that he built behind the sunshine. A universe so well constructed and so meticulously maintained that it makes every other entry on this list look like amateur hour. Because while other members got caught by dispatch, exposed by hackers, traced by fan detectives, or inadvertently revealed by their own partners, J-Hope reportedly maintained a relationship for years, not months, not a fleeting connection, but a sustained, committed, deeply personal partnership without a single credible leak, a single matching photo, or a single breadcrumb trail for the internet's army of investigators to follow. In a world where privacy is a myth, J-Hope made it real. And when the truth finally surfaced, it wasn't through scandal. It was through time. Let's build this properly, because J-Hope's story doesn't make sense without understanding the architecture of his public identity and how brilliantly it functioned as a shield. From BTS's debut in June 2013, Hoseok carved out a role within the group that was both essential and strategically ingenious. He was the mood maker, the energy source, the member who turned airport arrivals into impromptu dance performances and fan meetings into comedy shows. His catchphrase, "I'm your hope, you're my hope, I'm J-Hope," became so iconic that it transcended language barriers and embedded itself into global pop culture. But here's what most people missed about that catchphrase, and what becomes painfully obvious in retrospect: it was a redirect. Every time a conversation got too personal, every time an interviewer probed toward romantic territory, every time a fan asked about his ideal type or his relationship status, Hoseok deployed the sunshine. He cracked a joke. He did a dance. He made a face so exaggerated and endearing that the room dissolved into laughter and the question evaporated into thin air. It wasn't evasion, it was a magic trick. While you were watching the spectacle of his right hand, his left hand was quietly building a life that nobody had permission to see. The rumors, when they eventually emerged, didn't come from the usual channels. There was no dispatch countdown, no anonymous forum post, no leaked photograph from a hotel security camera. Instead, the information trickled out through the quietest and most credible source in the K-pop ecosystem, industry insiders who spoke not on the record, but in the margins. Whispers among entertainment journalists. Off-the-record comments from people adjacent to Hybe's inner operations. The kind of information that doesn't make headlines because it can't be verified with photographs, but carries the weight of institutional knowledge. And what these insiders described was extraordinary, not because it was scandalous, but because it was the opposite of scandalous. They described a relationship characterized by maturity, stability, and a mutual understanding of the impossible circumstances that came with loving someone as famous as Young Hoseok. The woman, according to these accounts, was not a celebrity, not an entertainer, not a social media personality, and not anyone who had any interest in being known. She was described as someone with her own established career, her own identity, her own life, someone who didn't need J-Hope's fame to validate her existence and who, crucially, understood that being with him meant accepting a form of invisibility that most people would find intolerable. She couldn't post about him, couldn't be seen with him in public, couldn't tell her friends the full truth about who she was dating. She existed in the negative space of his public life, present in every moment that wasn't documented, real in every hour that wasn't accounted for, and invisible in every photograph that was taken. The hotel visits, in J-Hope's case, weren't dramatic midnight escapes or paparazzi dodging operations through underground parking garages. According to the circulated accounts, they were almost boringly ordinary, and that's what made them remarkable. Hoseok reportedly favored small, understated accommodations over the flashy five-star properties that most celebrities gravitated toward. Not the Park Hyatt or the Shilla, places where bellhops are trained to spot celebrities and where the lobby traffic includes enough entertainment industry figures to constitute a casting call, But quieter properties in neighborhoods like Seongsadong or Mangwon-dong, areas that had undergone gentrification into creative hubs, but hadn't yet reached the celebrity saturation point of Gangnam or Cheongdam. These were places where the staff was small enough to be personally vetted, where the guest list was curated rather than open, and where the aesthetic was warm and human scale rather than imposing and grand. He didn't need a presidential suite with a private elevator. He needed a room with a door that closed and a world that didn't follow him inside. The longevity of the relationship was what stunned people most when the information began circulating more widely. Other BTS dating stories were measured in months, brief windows of connection that flared and faded under the pressure of public scrutiny. J-Hope's situation was measured in years. Multiple years. A span of time that encompassed entire comeback cycles, world tours, album releases, award ceremonies, military enlistment preparations, and the existential crisis of BTS's 2022 hiatus announcement. Through all of it, through the tears, the pressures, the separations, the time zone differences during international tours, the months of zero physical contact during military service, the relationship reportedly endured. And it endured not because of dramatic gestures or grand romantic declarations, but because of the same quality that defined J-Hope's contribution to BTS from the very beginning: consistency. The final question is about us, the audience, the fans, the consumers of these stories. What do we do with the knowledge that the people we idolize are human? Do we punish them for it? Do we deny it? Or do we take the most radical, most difficult, most rewarding option available? Do we celebrate it? Because BTS didn't just make music. They made a mirror. And every hotel visit, every secret relationship, every breadcrumb trail and leaked photograph and midnight escape is a reflection not just of their humanity, but of ours. How we respond to their love stories says more about us than it ever says about them. And on that note, this list is closed. The stories have been told. The doors have been opened, examined, and respectfully shut. Whatever happens next in the lives of Kim Seokjin, Kim Taehyung, Min Younghee, John Jungkook, Kim Namjoon, Park Jimin, and Young Hoseok, whether they love publicly or privately, loudly or silently, briefly or forever, is theirs. Not ours. Not dispatches. Not the internet's. Theirs. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And the next time you see a headline about an idol and a hotel, remember this list and ask yourself not what happened, but why do I feel entitled to know? This has been your top 7. And the truth? It was never about the hotels. It was always about the humans inside them.